Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I'm your host, JP John Paz. With me today, very special guest, former SSW heavyweight champion. He is, of course, the progressive liberal himself, Mr. Daniel Richards. Daniel, what's going on? How you doing today, sir?
Hey, John, good to be with you.
What is going on in the world? What have you been up to?
I've been uh, wrestling again for the last several months after a layoff that encompassed COVID, as well as having a right knee replacement and some neck issues. So it's been going well so far, and much to my surprise, I've found myself on the national news again. So it's been great run so far.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that just because, obviously you've been doing the gimmick for a few years, but I was like, wow, I remember the coverage on like The Daily Show, HBO, Vice, all these other places, but all of a sudden CNN picked it up. So was that like you said, you were surprised, but was that out of nowhere?
Uh, well, no, not out of nowhere. Ellie Reeve, who you referenced Vice before, she was a reporter and really the first on the scene as far as when everything took off back in 2017. But then she saw, I guess, a tweet I had made about returning to the ring and was asking about that, and she was intrigued by the fact that, I mean, the reactions towards me have become more violent. It's instead of being the person people love to hate, is there's just way more hate, way more emphasis on hate. And so she came out to an event, and the crowd there certainly didn't disappoint on that theme.
Where was that show that she went to?
That was in Stickleyville, Virginia, so just near the Tennessee Virginia border.
Was that a raucous crowd, just as far as maybe being more on the right side, or what was that crowd like? I mean, they just didn't like the progressive liberal.
That's a town of 330 people, so they're pretty isolated from the world. Because one thing about these towns, I went to college in West Virginia and lived there for a couple years after, and of course have wrestled in these Bible Belt states for a long time. One thing that's really I find a commonality among a lot of these towns is that people don't leave. They stay there for, and they don't get exposed to the rest of the world as I see other people do in more urban areas like where I live, where they're exposed to more people who aren't like them. Um, so yeah, I come in. I think part of it was the CNN was there, so and that had been promoted, so they were amped up for that. But yeah, it got pretty extreme on this particular event.
So the reporter, she basically saw a tweet and was like, "I got to come back out and see where you're up to." She just wanted to kind of follow up on you.
Well, she had saved my number and I had hers, and she reached out to me, and just was letting answering her questions about what was going on. I certainly wasn't angling to be on television again, and but she found it worth coming out, and I do think there's a story there. I just think this is like, to me, it's like kind of January, the vibe of January 6th on on a micro level. So
What
shit trickles down from the top, and so people often are taking their cues from their favorite leader from the party with the magic R in it, and act accordingly.
when you go to those shows, are you expecting like that type of reaction, or it depends on what town it is in?
I'm expecting heat. I'm expecting to keep the people engaged and emotionally invested. Um, it's just the difference now is I need to keep my head on more of a swivel and watch and not get too close to the guardrail. unless I want to get hit, then that's just great. I'll just get real close.
So it's becoming, you're like you're saying, much more violent lately, or it's been a little bit different, I guess, after the pandemic.
Yeah, without question. I think it's a complete byproduct of January 6th. Because if we don't, because what people on that side of the fence would conclude, whether consciously or subconsciously, is, hey, if we don't like how something goes, we can just get really angry and act violent about it, or pretend it didn't even happen. And so you see that at these events. I mean, there's just a anger towards me that you know people that are demonized, whether it's AOC or Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden himself, they're not coming to Stickleyville, but I am, and so to to them. I think I'm an extension of those people that they've been trained to hate, so they take it out on me.
Good for the character, though, right? You got to, if you're trying to get heat, you're trying to be a heel. Good for the character.
I want people to be emotionally invested. I don't want to get shot. If someone and I don't know, so I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to let that potential stop me from coming to these towns and doing
When
what I love.
when CNN comes out and they're doing this article and stuff, does that get you more bookings? Does that get you more notice though? Have you noticed like an uptick?
I've gotten an uptick in media coverage again. Yeah, more bookings, not on the level I would say from 2017, because frankly, I think people are burnt out on politics. There are some promotions that I've heard back from through third parties that say, "Hey, like we don't want to touch it because of the political element of it." I nearly was canceled off a show by the owner, the person who ran a building, because they were afraid of a riot ensuing.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. So people just afraid of what might happen because they get so invested into the character, they hate you so much.
Well, I think again, it's another thing of January 6th. Like I don't think they're consciously thinking January 6th, but I think it's more subconscious thought. Like, hey, if we're bringing this guy in that people don't like their views, they could get violent because that's how they react to things now. So let's not bring that to our town or to our building.
It's almost old school in a way when, like the 80s or 70s and they're having riots and, Ole Anderson's getting stabbed and Cornette's trying to get stabbed. It's almost old school a little bit with some of these fans.
Yeah, I mean that's what people often say. I mean, I've seen it before, but to see it in 2022 is certainly it's unique. There's not a lot of real heat out there.
Yeah, not to that level. No, not really. Not since, I guess you could say, maybe the '90s. Really, like as far as heat and throwing garbage in the ring and people going crazy in that level, you rarely see it these days.
Yeah, well, I mean, so it's I think it's hard to be a heel, especially on a national level, because if you're a cool, if you're really good at it, people now will tend to like you. I'm just, but on a regional level, I'm going to places where like there's no chance these people are going to like me, no matter
Right.
what.
Yep.
So I could invent the cure for cancer, but I'm a evil liberal, so that's not going to change. And but we use politics, John, this just a tiny amount. That's what a lot of people miss. I'm more poking fun at these people and their way of life and their insecurities from living where they are and their fears of how people perceive them because they have a southern accent and live in one of these small towns, and it's pretty easy to play on those insecurities. That's more what I do than anything about we use a smidge of politics.
When you look at the progressive liberal, the character, when you go back on it, when did you create it? How did you create it? How'd you come up with it? Like, what is like the genesis of the progressive liberal character?
I had a break in the business. It like, and so it was a couple years before I came back in 2014. I I thought so. 2012, I was in the car and just conceptualized the idea. I mean, these are my. I lean left for real. That's not a character. So I was like, what if I brought that in? Like, and this is before Trump or anything. And it just happened when I finally had the opportunity to bring that to the ring. Like you could see there was something to it. And then I was fortunate enough to get local coverage because of it, and then eventually national coverage. And I mean, the response I got, especially in 2017, and how viral it went was insane. But politics, I think, were less tiresome then than they are now. The subject of Trump was was newer in the political realm than it is now, where I mean, I think his own people are tired of his stick, because it's not like he's got new material in the last 6 years.
So when you kind of created the character, what was the thought process? Was just that it was something you believed in and something you thought like this will be a great way to get noticed and start getting some heat.
I I just wanted heat. I wasn't seeking out any attention beyond that. Just like for the longest time, I was Daniel Richards, or Dan Richards, Big Dan Richards, Dynamite Dan Richards, and there's just nothing like who, as Tom Pritchard would say, what makes Dan Richards dynamite. Uh, there wasn't really an answer for it. It's just a moniker to throw in front of the name. Um, but this I could explain and get with, and people could quickly understand if they'd never seen me before. I could come out and people would quickly understand like who I am, and quickly determine how they feel about me. And that's all I wanted from this. And everything else has been, amazing and icing on the cake, to use a cliche.
So when you create the character, is it spawned from something like as far as like do you take it from certain places and are you adding stuff from maybe something in real life?
Well, I mean, these are my views. Now, would I go down here at home? Would I just walk down the street, and if I saw someone in a Trump shirt, would I cut a promo on them? No, I have no interest. But it for and as a business person here locally, my community, I don't want to alienate half the people. But I simultaneously, I'm here, I'm home. I hear a lot of ignorant stuff said, on the right, just with bias and no thought on their part. And so getting out into the ring and having a microphone in my hand, I get to kind of exercise those demons. So it's almost therapeutic for me in a way.
When you're doing that, like you say, and don't want to cut off 50% of the audience, but in wrestling though, you can, right? I mean, in wrestling, you want to cut off more than 50% of the audience.
Oh, to me, I'm like, I'm not trying to be the cool heel. I want everyone to hate me. So when I knew I could have that, to a pretty large degree, like, because I knew, like, the name, the progressive liberal, but I'm wearing a Hillary shirt in 2017 and a Biden shirt today, and neither of them are considered. They're considered more centrist, I think, by those who care or pay attention to the politics part of it. So I wanted them to hate me too. Um, but of course, now I've been to places like here in Richmond and Northern Virginia. I wrestled for Nova Pro, you know who love the progressive liberal, and so it was. probably 90-10 in terms of the audience split for liking me.
When you look at that, though, do you play up to that, or you want to still be a heel for, or it's like, I'll be a babyface for this crowd because that's what they want.
Well, I think they're, when you're just because the audience, how their reaction changed doesn't mean you change who you are. You continue to work. It's just their reaction's going to be different. But I don't think you just change your work and the character all of a sudden. You're saying the same things. It's just going to get a different reaction.
So Nova Pro, babyface, Stickleyville, Virginia, definitely a heel for sure.
That's a good contrast. Yes.
When the progressive liberal is coming up, and when you created it, when Hillary went up against Donald Trump and loses the election in 2016, did you think that was kind of the end of the gimmick? Did you think like, oh man, he can't do the gimmick, or did you think that was a plus? That was a good thing?
I thought it would. Oh man, this is gonna. Yeah, this could. I thought it was gonna hurt me, and it was quite the opposite because I was now. As Vice did a good job documenting before, like I wasn't like the evil foreigner. I was someone within the country going against the America or the party in power. So that was kind of like the man bites dog scenario that made it newsworthy for the time.
So you thought because Trump won, like, oh man, I don't know if the gimmick can continue on. You know what I mean? Like, basically thinking like that's the way that people are going to vote. They might not be so positive, or this gimmick might not have any legs.
I just thought, well, and short sighted at the time, hindsight being 2020. But I just thought then, okay, people will have a ha ha moment with me for a few weeks, and then maybe lose its steam, lose its legs, and that would be it. But here we are talking again, and it because Biden's in power, it hasn't changed. People still hate the progressive liberal Daniel Richards in the red states.
Yeah, I could definitely see that for sure. With Trump and him winning, and like we were saying, like, oh, maybe the gimmick might not do so well. So when Biden takes, did you kind of think opposite? Like, oh, now that Biden is in, now, and Trump is gone. Now, do you think that the gimmick was going to continue on, or did you just think the same reaction? Like, I think I'm good either way.
I felt, I was just going to roll with the punches and I'd be fine either way.
When Biden wins, and obviously the controversy with January 6th, like you mentioned, and the Trump stuff goes on, do you play up that more with your gimmick? Like when you're cutting promos and stuff, do you throw all that stuff out there?
I mean, again, we use it this much. Okay. Vince, I'm doing an interview. Jeez, sorry. Live interview.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your question again? I'm so sorry.
Well, just saying that with the promos and stuff, do you play it up with the January 6th stuff? Do you get more heat with that? Like, do you play it up?
Well, I mean, we're coming up on a year on that now. We use, or I use, whatever's relevant at the time. Like last weekend, I gave praise to Joe Biden for bringing Brittany Griner back home.
Right.
Because the audience that hates me, they don't look beyond like whatever their favorite talking head says about, hey, why didn't he bring Whelan home? They instead say they just hear, they don't look at like, well, Trump didn't bring him home for 2 years. He was captured under Trump. They don't pay attention to the what the press secretary said, where it was like, hey, one, you can have Griner or nothing. They don't care about those details. So I'll just play up on that, and they get upset, which is great.
I could definitely see that being a big talking point or a big sticking point. Like you stay current, basically, whatever's kind of going on, and you stay current with the gimmick.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for sure. I mean, there's always gonna be something in the news that we can play on, whether it's local or national.
When you're doing the gimmick nowadays, and I know you said you took a couple years off, you got healthy. Is it fresher, do you think, or do you think that it's was fresher when you first started? Like, do you think that you saw a resurgence and a real volt or bolt into it?
I just think it's the reaction has changed, and as CNN documented with it being more violent. I don't think it's less, more fresh, less fresh. I think my mind is fresher, which has been great because wrestling is so mental, as much as anything. So I found I was pleased that my mind was sharp. I feel like my work has been better in the ring, and I think that's the best part of the layoff, frankly, for me and for the audience ultimately, because I think the better the work, the more people are going to be engaged and enjoy it.
So you think the mental more so than the physical, as far as the wrestling is concerned?
Oh, for sure. I mean, don't get me wrong; it's super physical sport, that takes its toll, and it has and will continue to. But I think as far as how you execute, it's not about doing all these moves. It's about when to do them, what order to do them. Um, Less is more often.
Dr. Tom, you mentioned before, he always says wrestling is only 10% of what you got to do because he's talking about politics, the mental, the travel, the expenses, the money, all that other stuff that goes into it, right? I mean, that's the
Oh
actual
yeah,
wrestling is only a small part.
that's that's what I tell people all the time. It's like what happens in the ring is just like a small fraction of everything that goes into it. Just the travel. I don't know if you everything you said plus the travel. If you didn't say that as well, like that's a huge part of it.
And like you mentioned, Dr. Tom was saying about who was Dynamite Dan, and like you have to have a character. Well, like obviously you solved that riddle, right? I mean, obviously that's a huge part of it too. You got to have the character, otherwise no one's going to care about anything you do in the ring.
I mean, you can still get like people emotionally invested through your work, right?
Hmm.
Even if you don't have a character, but it does help when there's like an emotional attachment, and they can, if the fans can quickly describe who you are, like say a fan brings a friend to an event and they can quickly tell them who you are, what you're about. Like I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. Like, what do they say? One sentence or whatever you can describe, or a few words you could describe who the guy is.
Yeah, elevator pitch or what have you. Yeah.
What is the elevator pitch for the progressive liberal? Just hey, I'm a progressive liberal.
Well, I think the way they would say it is he's a gosh darn liberal and he's coming in and telling us how to live.
Yeah, for
We
sure.
don't like him. Yeah.
And it's funny, a lot of your where you wrestle, a lot of the states you are red, right? Like I guess I
Oh
would
yeah.
think West Virginia, Virginia, Tennessee. I'm guessing might be more red.
Yep. Oh, North Carolina is really red. I mean, it's kind the political map in our country. It's just the more populated areas are more blue, and the rural areas are red. I mean, that's the elevator pitch and how we're divided.
When you look at your career, like where you're wrestling, where do you wrestle most though? Like where are you? Is it mostly Virginia area?
I'm doing a lot in Tennessee right now. Southern States Wrestling has gotten a rebrand, but I'm wrestling in Kentucky and Virginia for All Star Wrestling, which is based out of Virginia but licensed to promote in Kentucky as well, because those are both commissioned states. Um, those are the main areas right now. I mean, I'd love to wrestle anywhere and everywhere, but at the same time, and we may we may have a pipeline to Germany coming up. We had German media with us a couple weeks ago, and then uh, another German media outlet coming up. So we may have, and we have a connection that friend of a friend in Germany. So we may be able, Bo and I might find ourselves there, which would be outstanding. I'd love to do, but mostly my real estate business keeps me close to home.
Bo James talking about, right?
Yep, Bo James.
Did he, obviously the king of Kingsport, did he help you like through your career and train you, or was he mostly just later on in the career help you with bookings, SSW, and even obviously, helping create the progressive liberal character?
I mean, I met Bo not long after I started, and yeah, I started making towns with him, getting book places because of him. But I mean, it's funny when I listen to the Cornette podcast, when I hear him break down a match or wrestling psychology, it's like when I've been in the car with Bo. I mean, he's been around for 30 years. To me, is a been a huge, over he'll tell you, and I agree, like a huge overachiever, because you look at him, you wouldn't have expected him to accomplish all he has, but he worked in the Memphis territory. He's wrestled all over the country and just done a lot, and rubbed shoulders and worked with some of the greatest talents and minds in the business, and I've been fortunate enough to get some of that knowledge passed down to me, and I'm grateful for that.
Where did you guys meet? Was it at SSW, or where did you guys kind
No,
of?
no, and he was coming in to West Virginia and doing shots there, and that's where I started. So that's where I met him.
How did you actually get in though? Like, how did you break in? I know we're talking about almost 20 years ago, right? I mean, when you actually broke into the business.
Yeah, yeah. So the guy who started me, um, so I went to school at Concord College. Now it's Concord University, but they would have every spring. They would have like spring blast, or a whole week of activities, but it always would involve pro wrestling, because one of the students there was wrestling. So he would get it booked, and I was asked him like, "Hey, who trained you?" And got the name Scotty McKeever. And Scotty's no longer with us, but Scotty got me started. I would train once. There was a weekly show in Oak Hill, West Virginia, so I would train weekly before the show, set up the ring, train for a couple hours, and like he tried to run me off. You know, like I took 250 bumps my first day. And he would just keep having me do that to see if I would quit, and I wouldn't stop. And because I was one of those kids that just said like, "Hey, a lot of people say they're gonna do this or that when they're a kid, and I said, like a lot of kids did, I wanted to be a pro wrestler. I just stuck with it.
When that is going on, do you find that to be less and less nowadays in wrestling, where the guys are training you to almost quit, almost give up? Because I feel like that's like an old school thing where they get the money up front or whatever, and they try to get you to quit.
Yeah, I can't speak on how much of that goes on, because I don't know. I know there's a lot of great schools now that are like reputable, that people can go to. The Jacob Pritchard Wrestling Academy, or Jacobs Pritchard Wrestling Academy. They're in Knoxville. Of course, like you can be a great athlete and possibly get pumped right into the NXT system. But I would just recommend, like, if you're going to be, if you're going to be a great real estate agent, I think you want to hang your license and work in a brokerage where the broker had a track record as a great salesperson. So you can hopefully, if you apply yourself, become that. And I think it's the same thing with pro wrestling. Like, if you're going to go to a school um, and shell out thousands of dollars, then go get trained by Dr. Tom 5 nights a week, because he's trained, it had an influence in the career of like pretty much any name you would know over the last 30 years.
Oh yeah, The Rock, Kurt Angle, Mark Henry. He did some training with obviously. Maybe you shouldn't mention it, but did some training with Teddy Hart. I mean, there's a ton of people. If you go through the history, Edge, Christian, the Hardys. I mean, he's been around and influenced a lot of these guys.
Even the guys today, Roman Reigns, Bray
Yeah.
Wyatt, I mean,
Yep.
he played some part in their development, and they'd be the first to tell you.
Yeah, definitely. So when did you realize when you were coming along in the business, like did it take you a few years to realize about the character? I know obviously we know when you created the Progressive Liberal, but did you notice that or did you know that when you first started wrestling, like, man, I really need a character, or you're just going out there wrestling and trying to get dates and stuff?
Yeah, I think I was just trying to get, like, the emphasis on character, I think, wasn't as big, or maybe just not in my mind. So I just wanted to wrestle. I didn't really think about that stuff. And yeah, I eventually smartened up. I should have a way for people to better identify me than just, coming out and just being, I didn't want to be just another guy after a while.
Right, because if you think about it, a lot of those guys just get lost in the shuffle. If just random generic guy A versus generic guy B, you're going to forget them. They're just going to get lost in the shuffle. You have to stick out.
Yeah, I didn't want to be generic guy.
Exactly. So when you're kind of going along in your career, where have you worked? Like some other places that we would know. I know VCW obviously, but where are some other places that you worked as you're making the come up?
I mean, I wrestled that place in Atlanta. I can't remember the name of that promotion. They just let everybody stand right around the ring, which is crazy to me from so many standpoints. I mean, a lot up and down the East Coast. I mean, I go where I'm booked. I've had a chance to wrestle in like Washington State early in my career. I got to wrestle in Canada, 2018, which was really cool. It's funny, the fans hated me there too. Got to do some stuff in New York, so that was great. So just, I'll go anywhere. I've got to do stuff for I was booked as extra talent for WWE a few times. Got tryouts for them. Obviously, like, nothing's come of that. Nothing came of that, but just the opportunity was so cool.
Yeah, to be able to do that. How did that come about? How did the tryouts come about?
I don't, I don't. Well, I mean, if you're booked as extra talent, typically you'll get to do a tryout match, and it's one of the most It's not. I don't think it's super hard. Like, you reach out and make them aware of your presence, and like and send them a promo picture, and like, I guess if your promo picture is flattering enough, they'll you can, and follow their instructions, you can get booked as extra talent. Like, now they never put me on screen with their talent because I'm 6'5", and they don't want me as an extra backstage, like, stand. I want to say towering over a lot of their guys, but so I was never going to be the medical professional or anything like that. And they never had a security guard role. That's okay.
That's a bad look, though, right? If the extra is bigger than the wrestler, obviously 6'5", you're going to be bigger than 80% of the guys in WWE now.
Taller, at least, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always a bad look, I think. Even I remember when Jonathan Coachman was the announcer. Sometimes that was a bad look. I know when he was there, some of the guys were equal height, but as the time went on, it was like, oh my God, Coachman is huge. He's 6'3" or 6'4". It's like I don't know if like usually the announcer should be smaller. So yeah, I know what you mean. Like you can't have an extra at 6'5" walking around.
Probably not. No, but I was literally told that. Like there was a segment with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, and I couldn't be anywhere in the foreground or background for that matter.
Right, they're both about 6 foot, so I mean that wouldn't look good for them. Just aesthetically, wouldn't look great.
Oh, to the company, yeah. I mean, and I was there to do what they asked. So for the most part, that was enjoy catering.
How was the catering? How was the spread?
Oh, it's amazing. Oh, it's incredible.
I would imagine that. With that and like getting booked, how do you get extra work? Like, how does that actually happen? Do you have to do that through somebody else and they get you the work?
No, just reach out to whoever's in charge of handling that, and go from there. I was just fortunate enough to get contacted a couple of times and do that.
And I remember a few years ago, obviously, it was part of my convention, but David Arquette came into town in Richmond, Virginia, a few years ago. You got to be a part of the documentary, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. I got a cameo.
Oh, you're on mute. There you go. We were talking about Arquette, your role with Dave.
Yeah, yeah. So that was really cool. We were there, thanks to you guys. We had a table to sell tickets for the event we were running. It was a couple weeks from then. So that was really like a really cool period in Richmond because we had so much wrestling going on. Because we had you guys, and then we had our event which sold out. And I was grateful for having all my media contacts to be able to promote that, and we raised a bunch of money for Children's Miracle Network with that event. But yeah, Arquette was there at that convention. He had just started his comeback tour and was going to be training. So I mean, he was just starting to train. So it's funny, like I had already been on television a bunch at that point, and they have all these cameras there, and we have all these young guys training, and they were like, who wants to get in there with Arquette? And I was more than willing to let one of them do it because it'd be a big deal to them. No one raised their hand, so I was like, okay, I'll do it. And so then I was in the documentary. Or again, just a really small part, but it was still pretty cool. And
That day, obviously, they edited it down a lot smaller, but that was a long day of training. You guys did a lot of stuff, and he was like receptive to everything, which was crazy. I mean, he was sweeping up the ring and stuff.
He was super humble. Yeah, like that was all legit. He was a cool guy. We got a picture with him with our event poster for our social media promoting it. So I mean, he was cool as hell.
Yeah, he was awesome. What a cool experience. You would never know that, like a guy like that from Hollywood, but man, he was awesome. What a cool guy, easygoing, humble as hell.
Yep. Yeah, that was cool. And I mean, that's where I met Nash, Kevin Nash, and he was here. It's funny to hear him like 4 years later talking, mentioning the news coverage on his podcast. So that was pretty cool. And, I was grateful for you guys because you gave us a platform to sell tickets for our event on a local level there, in-person level. And that turned out really well. And then, after our event, which was that Friday, we had Raw here in Richmond at the Coliseum on that following Monday. So it was like a big 2 weeks there.
Yeah, that was cool. And Nash, I guess you said he was talking about you on the podcast?
Yeah. I mean, him and Sean caught the story on CNN, so they talked about it.
Wow, that's pretty damn cool. Nice.
Yeah, I mean, well, to get referenced by Cornette back the first time when we had our little news cycle, and then Nash this time around is pretty badass because I respect their views on the business very much.
Nice. As we start to wind it down here, we head towards the finish. What's next wrestling wise? Where will you be wrestling? Where can we see you? Stuff like that.
I need to update my upcoming dates on my page, but a lot more in the Bible Belt. Check out Southern States Wrestling's YouTube page. I believe I'll have a match on that channel the first Friday or Saturday in January. So look for that, and continue to follow. And I'll do a better job of updating my upcoming events. I'll be in Huntington, West Virginia, December 17th. So check me out there, and it's looking forward to going where I'm booked.
Is there any place that you want to work? Like, obviously AEW would probably be on the list too, but is there places you want to work and you want to be able to wrestle?
I'm 42, but I'm not letting go to. I want to have a match on television. That's what I want, and I don't think that's outside of my ability to achieve that. So I'll keep going for it.
As far as AEW, WB, definitely open to it. I know you're like you said, but you're definitely open to it. You would love to do it.
Well, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, they're like, not that I'm 6'5". There's someone they can put me up against who's bigger, and see how it goes from there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, have you seen any Kenny and Spenny lately? I know I saw you at Kenny and Spenny not that long ago.
I love that they're touring and doing their comedy show. I mean, I don't know if you agree or not. I just think there's like nothing like that. I just think the people who booked it at that, where were we at Gardner, New Jersey?
Yeah.
For that, like they must have been like, what did we sign up for?
Yeah, I agree. Like the bartenders were like, "Wait, what? What did they just say? What
yeah,
the going on?
Like,
yeah,
what is going on? What are they talking about?" But they're just doing their shtick like live and in person. I mean, it's so ad-libbed and so great. I mean, I just think it's just such a. I can't wait for them to come back to the States. I mean, I love the show, and if anyone has never seen Kenny versus Spenny, like check it out, and they're super cool to talk to too. I mean, namely Kenny, but
hey, come on, don't rip on Spenny. He's great, but it was awesome to meet him. I love that they did the meet and greet beforehand because they're awesome guys.
Yeah, they're great.
Now
so, they did. I got a cameo. I bought a cameo from them for one of my friends who's a big fan. So, and awesome. they delivered there for sure too.
Oh, it's awesome! I didn't realize they were on Cameo. I might have to check that out.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they'll do it in spurts, and sometimes it's just one of them. But like I think right now they're doing stuff for Christmas, so it's both of them.
Very cool. Well, before I let you go, where can everybody find you on social media and all the sites?
Social media. Check out Progressive Liberal Daniel Richards on Facebook, and my Twitter handle is @ProgressLib804. And if you know anyone who needs to buy or sell real estate here in Central Virginia, look me up, Daniel Harnsberger. I'm not hard to find.
Awesome. Dan, thank you so much for all the time today. Really appreciate it.
Good to reconnect with you, John.
Yes, great to talk to you again, and good luck with everything with the Progressive Liberal.
Thank you.